Hi. Okay. So let's start because we're right on time here. So good afternoon. My name is Teles Nobrega. I'm the current Sahara PTL, and I'm going to talk a little bit of what we did this last cycle and what are our plans for the next cycle of Sahara. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit of what Sahara is and what it does, because I'm not sure if everybody here is familiar with it. So basically, what Sahara is a data processing service. So we provide a way for you to deploy big data processing frameworks on OpenStack. And right now, we have 5 or 6 main plugins that we support. Those are Ambari, Mapr, Cloudera, Vanilla Hadoop, that's upstream Hadoop, and we have upstream Spark and upstream Storm as well. So as I said, Sahara provides a way to deploy data processing clusters with minimal effort from the user. So if anybody here has ever had an experience to deploy a Hadoop cluster or anything like that, you know how hard it can get, configuration, setting up networks and all that kind of stuff. And what we do is we take all of the effort into our hands, and you just have to select whatever you want to have as a data processing service and how big your cluster is and all these details. And also, Sahara provides the capability to run jobs on those clusters. So we provide the cluster, and we also provide a way for you to run the jobs in the cluster. So you can use Sahara UI to configure a job and run on the cluster. You don't have to go into the machine and run the command line inside the machine to run a job. So a little bit on the project background. We started back in June. I think that was 2013. It's a way back. And the last cycle, the last release, we had about 17 contributors to the code and reveals. But of those 17, we only have about 4 active contributors. Those are like the 4 cores that we have right now. And this is due to the big drop on OpenStack developers that happened a couple years ago. But we're getting new contributors slowly and hopefully going to get a bigger community soon. On the last available user survey from OpenStack, we had Sahara deployed in 11% of the production clouds, and we had 8% in test phase. And also we had a good interest in Sahara, since we had like 25% of users indicated they're interested in starting using Sahara. So hopefully it's going to grow the number of Sahara deployments in production as well. So getting to Sahara a little bit, there are some namings that are very important to understand Sahara. So first we need to know what a cluster is, and that's basically a group of machines that we have with a data processing framework deployed on it. And that could be Hadoop, Spark, Storm, or whatever, the ones that I said before. And to have a cluster in Sahara, you first need to configure node groups. So what are these node groups? Node groups are a group of processes that's going to be running in a single machine. So for example, for Hadoop, we usually deploy Hadoop with at least 2 node groups. One is the master, one is the slave. In the master node group, you're going to select the specific processes that's going to be running on the master. So it's usually a name node, and I think it's a master or something that's from Hadoop. And you're going to run a data node and a data manager on the slave. So that's what the node group is, the specific processes that's going to run on the instances on the cluster. And cluster templates is a gathering of node group templates. So on the cluster, you can select how many instances of this node group you want in your cluster. So for example, you can have 1 master of Hadoop, and you can have 5 slaves on the same cluster. So it can grow to wherever direction you want. And the other important part of Sahara are the jobs. That's what we call the elastic data processing elastic data processing part of Sahara. And that's how we allow users to run the jobs in Sahara. So for that, you have 3 main things that you need to know. The first one is data sources. So data sources, they are how you configure the input and output of your processing. So data sources can be the source of data, or it can be the outsource of data, where Sahara is going to store the data after it's done processing. Job binary, that's the executable that you use to run the job. That could be a jar file, a .py file, or whatever works with the framework you're using. And job templates is how you bring those two together. That's when you configure the executable that you use, and you put the data sources that it's going to use, and you configure the whole thing to run in a specific framework. A little overview of the architecture. That's the simple view of the architecture. There is one that's more complex, but I didn't think it was necessary for this. So basically, Sahara is a very common OpenStack process. We have a REST API. We have Horizon talking to it. And we talk to a bunch of different OpenStack projects. So we use Kison for authentication. We use Glance for image storing. We use Nova for spawning our instances. And you'll see that Sahara is directly connected to Nova on that picture, but that's not entirely true, because we actually outsource that responsibility to communicate to Nova to Heat. So we use Heat templates to configure all the cluster spawning stuff. So there should be a Heat box between Sahara and Nova there. And we use Swift for data source and storing the job binaries and everything. We could use internal database as well, but we mostly recommend using Swift since it's a more reliable source of storage. Getting into the new features and enhancements that we did in Queens, we exposed API v2 as experimental. So it is already available by default, but it's still in an experimental state. And this is actually a big win for us, because Mike here was the one that started this work on API v2 maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I guess. And it's been going on for a while, slowly, but we're getting to the point that we're going to release it as the default and main supported API, hopefully in Rocky. But we have it in Queens as experimental, but it is by default available for you to use. We did have the policy code implemented. That was one of the community goals. That was for all projects, and now you can control Sahara policy from inside the code. You don't have to mess on the policy file anymore. You can just change inside the code, and it's going to generate a new policy file if you need it. And S3 object store, and that's one of the big things that we're actually having now. And this will allow us to communicate to Amazon S3 as a data source or a job binary source, and also going to allow us to use Radius Gateway to communicate with Ceph. And then we're going to have Ceph available for Sahara to communicate, store data, store binaries, and have all the information necessary. Also, we had a new feature implemented. It's called decommission of a specific node. And what is that? So in Sahara, you have a cluster, and this cluster has a bunch of machines. And if you wanted to, those machines you can scale up or down. So if you want more machines in your cluster, you can just choose to increase the number of machines on that node group. And you can also shrink it down. You can remove instances from it. But up to now, before Queens, you could, we basically removed the last added machine to the cluster. But that's not what users need. They need to be able to choose which instance they want to remove. So they can remove a specific instance that is giving them trouble, or it's a little bit slower than the others. And now we're allowed to do that. You can do it by REST API at this moment. That's the only option for now, because we're waiting for API v2 to be fully available to have that as an official feature. But yeah, it's going to be available through API v2 fully, Horizon and everything once API v2 comes out. But until then, you can use only the REST API to remove it. And import and export of templates. There was a feature done by one of the outreachy students on OpenStack. And I was the one mentoring her in doing this work. But the basic idea is sometimes you have to be creating templates, and a bunch of times you have a little problems. So for example, I was someone from universities, they can try to do a bunch of different configurations on it, and sometimes they deploy and redeploy OpenStack and kind of lose that information a bunch of times. And I got myself into that a couple of times. Okay, oh, that would be cool if I could just export the templates I had and import it later, and you just have to do it once, and then it's going to be available all the time. And that's what she did. So you now have the ability to export and import templates on Sahara. And you mainly have to change small things when you import. So it has a nice UI, so you can configure, for example, the image ID that you're going to use, because you can't really bring from one deployment to the other. They have different IDs, so you just have to select the small configuration changes. But it's basically very neat feature and made at least my life very easier as a testing day-to-day stuff on Sahara. So for Rocky, we plan to increase the support of API v2, so we want to keep that going. Like very often, we're making things better on API v2, so we're going to fully release, hopefully in Rocky, but I can't promise, as our workforce is very small at this moment. So, but we're trying to get API v2 done as soon as possible. Boot from volume. This is another feature that was proposed a long time ago, but didn't have anybody working on it. But the basic idea is, instead of starting clusters from images, we can have a volume that has everything configured on it, and we can spawn the clusters from volume. And it's probably going to be a lot faster using the volumes, and I'm working on that, and the idea is to have it available in Rocky already. And supposedly it's not a big change, but it involves different projects, and it could get complicated, but we're working on it. Plugin split from Sahara main code, and that's a big one that we're working on. And the basic idea of that is to make Sahara plugins upgrades easier, because right now the plugins are inside of a Sahara main code, and that's deployed when you deploy a whole OpenStack. So when a new plugin version comes out, it only comes out right now with a new plugin, with a new OpenStack release. So if you want to upgrade a plugin, you're going to have to take down your OpenStack, install the newest OpenStack release to have new plugins on Sahara. And that's not what you want. Like, it's just one small plugin. You don't want to upgrade your whole OpenStack release right away. So we're removing the plugins code from inside Sahara. We're going to have a separate repo for it, and it's going to be installed as a library for Sahara. And you're going to be able to simply remove this library and install the newest one if you wanted to upgrade to a new plugin version. So it's going to make operators' life a lot easier, for at least for on Sahara plugins upgrade. It's not a feature, but it's important to mention. Sahara is fully migrated to Storyboard. So we don't use Launchpad anymore to track bugs or anything. So we're fully using Storyboard, because that's a community thing going on. And since our project's it's a small one compared to the big ones, and we were able to migrate easily, and we're now completely using Storyboard. So if anybody here finds a bug or anything, please go to Storyboard instead of Launchpad to report it, because we're not looking at Launchpad anymore. Release teams. As you can see, scalability is not a big focus right now. There's not much going on in that work, and manageability is the one big one that we're focusing on, as well as modularity and user experience. The whole idea that Sahara has come to a point that it's fairly stable on what it does. And what we need to do right now is improve how users experience the whole Sahara thing, like creating clusters and running jobs. And that's what we're focused on for this cycle, probably the next one. It's been a while that we're focusing on this. And yeah, and I guess modularity is a big focus, because we're removing the plugins from the main code and kind of making things easier for the operators as well. For Stein, we plan to have full support of API v2, and by full support is completely, it's not dropping API v1. I think we're not going to drop right away, but we're going to have API v2 as main API, full support, one-to-one comparison with API 1.1, plus the new features that it brings. Health repair, that's sometimes a cluster goes into error state, and we need to repair that kind of stuff. We don't do it right now. We're planning to work on some solutions on how repair some clusters after it goes into error state or just goes into red states, like missing communication or something. We can try to figure out and fix it. It's probably not going to work for big problems because that might be like a deployment error or something that we won't be able to repair. But some small stuff probably going to be able to do it, and we're working on that. And Python 3 as default. Probably everyone knows that Python 2 is kind of losing support, and we need to move away from it so we don't run into troubles. And I was just at a talk yesterday about Python 2 drop, and the idea is to drop Python 2 fully at the beginning of U release, so that will be December of 2019, basically. But Sahara is in a really good state for Python 3. We already have tests running on Python 3. We just need to make sure that we are Python 3 first, 100% Python 3. Then we can drop Python 2 and make sure that we are Python 3 only. And that's 1 year down the road from, 1.5 years down the road from now. Have some major teams, same as before, manageability and user experience, those are the big ones. We want to make users' life easier and improve the experience of using Sahara, because that's the main point that we hear complaints. Sometimes people say, I like the idea, but it's not as easy to use as we would like to be, and that's what we focus on right now. I'm getting pretty close to the end. My time is almost up too, so we need your help. You're a small team, and we need user feedback as well. So if you have anything that you'd like to have supported on Sahara, if you have any ideas on how to improve user experience or anything else that you want to talk about, just ping me or send me an email. I have cards here if you want. I'm on IRC, Teles Nobrega at Openstack-Sahara too, so just let me know what you need, and we'll gladly do the work for it. And you can help us doing the work too, for sure. And I guess that's it. Thank you so much. And if you have questions, please come to the mic, because it's being recorded. And yep.
So, so far, how far have you implemented Sahara in terms of big data analytics or things like that? Is it fully supporting Spark, Hadoop, or how does it?
Yeah, I'm just going to repeat the question for the recording. So you're asking about how is the support for Hadoop, Spark, and everything on Sahara? We fully support. We have 4 distributions of Hadoop supported. That's Ambari, Mapr, Cloudera, and upstream Hadoop that you can spawn clusters and you can run jobs on it. That's fully working right now. And we have Spark deployed available as well, and we also have Storm. So those are fully supported, working. We always work on upgrading to the newest versions available. We can't do like right away because we need a little bit of time to make things work. But I think for the new release for Rocky, we're going to have Hadoop 3.0, Spark 2.2, Storm 2.1, Mapr 6, that's the newest one, CDH 5.13, that's Cloudera 5.13. I think those are the plugins versions that we have, and Ambari 2.6. I think those, and that's like the newest versions available, except for Cloudera. I think they have 5.14 already, but we won't be able to go 5.14 straight. We need to go 5.13 first, so we can make easier the upgrade for next time.
Now, like your developers team, how dynamic are they to work with, let's say, integrating a new project in Sahara? For example, I'm thinking of suggesting, let's say, machine learning algorithms within Sahara. How possible and open are you guys towards that?
It's very possible. We can talk later about what you want to do specifically, and we can see how much work would be. I think there is a project on OpenStack that does specifically machine learning as a service. So it could be a more straightforward for you, but we could talk and see how it work on Sahara as well. Yep. And I need to wrap up because there's a new talk coming on, and we can talk after when you come out. Thank you everyone for coming. Yep, appreciate it.